In the small town of Elridge, life moved at a slow, predictable pace. The most exciting events were Friday night football games and the occasional community fair, but Tyler Mason was restless. At 15, he had grown bored of school, rules, and the repetitive routine of his neighborhood. He wanted to be noticed. Online, he had built an image of himself that didn't match reality. Grainy videos of him holding stacks of cash, photos of him leaning against cars that weren't his, and vague captions about handling business late at night. Most of the cash was borrowed from friends for the pictures, and the cars belonged to strangers parked along his street. Tyler was not dangerous, but he wanted people to think he was. His small circle of friends encouraged the act, filming him as he pretended to make shady phone calls or stroll into stores like he owned the place. He spent hours scrolling through social media accounts of real gang members, copying their poses and slang. The more he played the part, the more he started believing it himself. Teachers noticed his grades dropping and his absences piling up, but Tyler brushed off their concerns. To him, school didn't matter if he could become the kind of person everyone in town whispered about. He often wandered through the town's back streets, hanging out near convenience stores and bus stops long after dark. His home life didn't offer much structure. His mother worked double shifts, and his father had been out of the picture for years. Most nights Tyler was left to his own devices, free to drift through the streets without anyone asking where he'd been. He craved recognition, the kind that came with danger. But he didn't realize that in the real world, danger could come looking for him in ways he couldn't control. It was during one of these nights, leaning against the side of a gas station with a soda in hand, that Tyler noticed a police cruiser slowly pull up. The officer behind the wheel was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a calm expression that didn't match the usual stern look Tyler expected from cops. Officer Richard Kane was well known in Elridge, decorated for his service, respected by his peers, and seen as a model of law enforcement. His reputation was spotless, and people trusted him without question. Kane had been watching Tyler for weeks, noticing the way the boy carried himself and the kind of attention he drew online. Kane knew that a kid like this could be useful. In the quiet town, gossip traveled fast, and Tyler's online antics were becoming a conversation topic among both teenagers and adults. Kane saw an opportunity. Tyler could be a distraction, someone to soak up attention while other things happened under the surface. Over the next few weeks, Kane began appearing in the same places as Tyler. Sometimes it was a coincidence, or at least it seemed that way. Other times, Kane would park his cruiser nearby and watch as Tyler interacted with friends. He never scolded him for loitering or asked him to move along. Instead, he gave off the impression that he was keeping an eye out for him, almost like an older brother figure. Tyler didn't know why a police officer would take interest in him, but he liked the unspoken approval. In his mind, having a cop around made him seem even more untouchable. What Tyler didn't see was the careful calculation behind Kane's actions. Every casual drive-by, every brief conversation, every nod of acknowledgement was part of a slow approach. Kane didn't rush. He wanted Tyler to feel comfortable, to trust him, and most importantly to see him as an ally. The more Tyler embraced this idea, the easier it would be to steer him into situations that served Kane's hidden agenda. The town of Elridge had no idea that one of its most respected officers was quietly watching a teenage boy, not out of concern for his safety, but because he saw a pawn in a much larger game. Tyler thought he was building a reputation all on his own, but he was already walking into a trap. His false image of toughness had made him visible, and in the shadows of that visibility, Kane was preparing to turn him into something far more dangerous and far more useful than Tyler ever intended to be. Officer Kane's interest in Tyler deepened in ways that went unnoticed by most. To the casual observer, it looked like a veteran cop keeping tabs on a troubled kid, a quiet act of community service. But Kane's real motive was rooted in manipulation. He had spent years carefully curating a clean image in Elridge while working a dangerous side business, supplying small but valuable scraps of police intelligence to local gangs. It was risky, but his reputation as a trustworthy officer shielded him from suspicion. Still, he needed a way to keep eyes off himself when things got too close. Someone who could draw attention away from what he was really doing. Tyler, with his online bravado and growing notoriety among local teens, was perfect for the role. The approach was gradual. Kane never offered anything outright in the beginning. He started with friendly nods, then short conversations that felt casual. He would pull up alongside Tyler on a slow evening, ask if he was staying out of trouble, then mention something small about what had been happening in town. A burglary on the west side, a fight near the high school, a store owner complaining about suspicious activity. These snippets made Tyler feel like he was being given privileged information, as if Kane trusted him in a way he didn't trust other kids. That sense of importance fed directly into the persona Tyler had built online. Over time, Kane began to shape how Tyler thought. He would drop comments about how looking tough was about perception more than action, that real influence came from making people believe you had power, not from proving it in fights or petty crimes. Tyler listened closely. He'd always craved the image of being feared, and Kane seemed to understand exactly how to get it without taking too many risks. The officer even gave small, harmless suggestions at first, like showing up in certain places at certain times to be seen by the right people, or posting certain kinds of photos that would make rumors spread. Kane knew that if Tyler followed these suggestions, his name would keep popping up in conversations both online and offline. Eventually, Kane began pushing the boundary. One afternoon, he mentioned in passing that there was a certain neighborhood where stolen goods were often stashed. He framed it like a simple observation, nothing more. But Tyler, eager to impress his growing audience, decided to check it out. He didn't find anything that day, but the seed had been planted. Soon after, Kane would drop more specific details, like a vacant house whose owner was away, or an alley where a friend of his had seen something valuable. To Kane, these were calculated moves. If Tyler acted on them, it would give Kane cover. Any unusual police interest in a location could be written off as monitoring a reckless teenager, rather than investigating anything that might lead back to him. Kane never told Tyler outright to commit a crime, but he knew exactly how to dangle information that would make the boy feel like he was discovering opportunities on his own. Tyler's trust in Kane grew. The officer started giving him rides, usually in an unmarked car, and would talk about how the police department didn't always play by the rules. He painted himself as someone who understood the game and could help Tyler navigate it. In Tyler's eyes, Kane wasn't just a cop anymore. He was an insider who saw potential in him. The attention made Tyler feel important in a way he had never experienced before. Meanwhile, Kane kept his official life spotless. He attended community meetings, volunteered at school events, and responded to calls with professionalism. No one suspected that he was slowly positioning a teenager as a decoy for his own protection. Tyler's online image grew bolder. He posted about knowing things before they happened, hinted that the police didn't mess with him, and exaggerated his connections. The other kids believed him, and even some adults began to wonder if he had some kind of immunity. The truth was, he did, but only as long as Kane found him useful. Kane was careful not to get too close in public, never giving anyone a reason to connect them beyond surface interactions. In private, though, the influence was constant. Every tip, every casual suggestion, every ride in the car was another thread pulling Tyler deeper into a situation he didn't understand. By the time Tyler started noticing that people looked at him differently, with a mix of curiosity and suspicion, it was already too late. Kane had turned him into a walking distraction, a living story for the town to watch. Tyler thought he was building his own legend, but in reality, he was being steered into a role that had nothing to do with his ambitions and everything to do with protecting someone else's secrets. It happened on a damp Thursday evening, the kind of night when the streets emptied early, and the air smelled faintly of rain-soaked asphalt. Kane had been circling Tyler for weeks, feeding him bits of information and watching how quickly the boy acted on them. This time the bait was bigger. He casually mentioned that there was a storage unit on the outskirts of town that had been left unlocked for days, full of electronics from a business that had recently gone bankrupt. He described it like an abandoned treasure chest, not worth the police's time but ripe for the taking if someone wanted to make a name for themselves. Kane didn't tell Tyler to go there, but he didn't have to. Tyler's mind was already spinning with possibilities before the conversation was over. By the following night, Tyler had decided this was his chance to prove he was more than just a kid with an online persona. He told a couple of friends about the tip, but when they hesitated, worried about getting caught, he shrugged them off and said he would go alone. He wanted all the credit. The storage facility sat at the end of a quiet road, surrounded by chain-link fencing and a single flickering streetlight. Tyler found the unit exactly where Kane had described it. The lock was broken, hanging loosely from the latch, and when he slid the door open, he saw stacks of boxes, some sealed, others half open, revealing laptop cases, speakers, and other electronics. His heart pounded as he began stacking items near the entrance, working quickly but clumsily. The space smelled like dust and old cardboard, and every creak of the metal walls made him glance nervously over his shoulder. He knew he had to move fast. After piling up what he could carry, he stuffed the goods into an old backpack and hurried out, locking the unit behind him just enough to make it look untouched. By the time he reached home, he was buzzing with adrenaline. The next morning, Tyler posted a blurred photo of the stolen items online with a vague caption about leveling up. It was enough to get people talking. Within hours, word spread around town that he had pulled off a big score. For Tyler, it was validation. For Kane, it was the perfect diversion. That same night, while half the town gossiped about the teenager's bold theft, Kane met with a contact in a quiet parking lot across town, passing along information about an upcoming police operation. No one suspected him. The chatter was all about Tyler, the reckless kid who seemed untouchable. When the theft was reported to the police, the investigation was strangely brief. An anonymous witness claimed they saw someone matching Tyler's description near the scene. That witness was Kane himself. The report quietly concluded with no charges filed, citing insufficient evidence. In reality, Kane had ensured the matter went nowhere, all while cementing Tyler's reputation as a troublemaker. The more Tyler became the focus of attention, the less anyone thought to look in Kane's direction. Over the next few weeks, Kane repeated the process in smaller ways. He would hint at places where Tyler could find easy opportunities. A shipment left unattended at the docks, a pawn shop that didn't keep close inventory, an unlocked shed behind a repair shop. Tyler took the bait every time, bragging online about his so-called wins. Each post, each whispered rumor, kept him in the spotlight and allowed Kane to keep moving in the shadows without fear. Tyler didn't notice the subtle pattern forming. He thought Kane was simply looking out for him, maybe even grooming him to be some kind of protege in a secret world where the rules were bent for those who knew the right people. He never considered that the right person was using him like a human shield. The turning point came when Tyler overheard two older guys at a gas station talking about him. One of them laughed and said, "That kid's either got a death wish or a badge in his pocket." The words rattled him. He had always wanted to be seen as fearless, but the implication that he was being protected by the police didn't sit right. If people thought he was Kane's pet project, it could ruin the image he had worked so hard to build. But before he could dwell on it too much, Kane gave him another lead, this one more tempting than anything before, and Tyler, still chasing the thrill, pushed his doubts aside. The setup was working perfectly. Kane had his cover, Tyler had his fame, and the town had a new story to talk about. But what neither of them realized was that more eyes were watching now, eyes that didn't belong to street gossip or nosy neighbors, but to people who had been tracking Kane's movements long before Tyler ever became a distraction. Tyler's online presence was louder than ever. Each stunt, each vague post, and each rumor about what he'd done seemed to grow in scale. Kids at school whispered about him, and older teens who once ignored him now watched his moves closely. Some even tried to befriend him, hoping to ride the wave of his sudden notoriety. But with the attention came suspicion. People who operated in the town's real criminal circles began to question how a 15-year-old could keep pulling off risky moves without facing serious consequences. The whispers turned into theories, and one of the most persistent was that he had a cop in his pocket. At first, Tyler brushed it off. He told himself that jealous people would say anything to explain someone else's success. But then he noticed things that were harder to ignore. Whenever he was in a tight spot, hanging around somewhere he shouldn't be, caught somewhere after hours, Kane always appeared before things escalated. Other kids caught breaking the same rules ended up in trouble. Tyler never did. Even when he was caught with items that clearly weren't his, the encounters ended with Kane ushering him away instead of taking his name for a report. The moment that truly made him pause came on an afternoon when Kane asked for a quick ride home after spotting him near the station. Kane left Tyler waiting in his car while he ran inside to grab something. Tyler, bored, began glancing around. On the passenger seat was a plain folder, the kind used for police case files. It was unmarked on the outside, but curiosity got the better of him. Inside, he found pages detailing petty thefts, break-ins, and property damage, all with his name in the suspect line. What shocked him was that every file was stamped with the same red mark, case closed. Some had barely any notes at all, just a few vague witness statements, and then the closure stamp. He shoved the folder back in place before Kane returned, but the discovery sat heavy in his mind. Kane wasn't just protecting him, he was making sure these incidents disappeared entirely. At first, Tyler saw it as proof that Kane really did have his back, but the more he thought about it, the more he began to wonder why. Protecting him from one or two small mistakes was one thing. Erasing an entire list of crimes was something else entirely. Kane wasn't doing this out of kindness, there had to be a reason. In the weeks that followed, Tyler began to see patterns he had missed before. The times Kane tipped him off about opportunities always lined up with unrelated incidents in town, robberies, drug busts, and other police activity that never made the papers. When Tyler was stealing from the storage unit, Kane had been meeting someone across town. When he was hitting the pawn shop, Kane's cruiser was spotted near a warehouse that would later be raided. Tyler's so-called wins were always perfectly timed distraction. The realization didn't make him stop. If anything, it made him uneasy, but also curious. He wanted to know exactly what Kane was up to, but Kane seemed to sense the shift in his attitude. The conversations grew shorter, more direct. Kane no longer offered casual advice. He gave instructions, and there was an edge in his tone that hadn't been there before. It was clear that whatever game they were playing, Kane intended to keep control. Meanwhile, others were watching Tyler more closely. The same gang members who had once admired his boldness now viewed him with suspicion. One of them confronted him outside a convenience store, asking point-blank how he managed to avoid getting arrested. Tyler brushed it off, but he could feel the tension building. It wasn't just criminals who were paying attention. A black SUV had been parked near his house more than once, its driver hidden behind tinted windows. Tyler's unease grew into paranoia. He started second-guessing Kane's tips, wondering if each one was just another move in a game he didn't understand. He tried skipping out on one of the opportunities Kane mentioned. But the next day Kane showed up outside his school, reminding him that loyalty mattered in this town. The message was clear. He was in too deep to walk away. It was becoming harder to pretend that he was in control of his image. The truth was, Kane had been pulling the strings from the start, and Tyler was beginning to feel like a prop in a show he hadn't agreed to star in. He thought about the folder in Kane's car, the closed cases, and the way every one of his so-called victories was perfectly timed to keep eyes off someone else. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit together, and the picture they formed was dangerous. What Tyler didn't yet know was that Kane's carefully constructed shield was already cracking. Internal Affairs had been tracking Kane's activities for months, quietly gathering evidence. Tyler's growing fame had actually made their job easier, because every time the boy's name popped up in connection to a suspicious incident, Kane's own movements could be compared. The net was slowly closing. and when it did, Tyler would find himself caught in it right alongside the man who had used him as cover.